So let me try to take you through this. So I'm going to kick off with a quick video. Before I do, though, this notion of how the world has changed. And by the way, this is important because when you think about the why, right, there was research that came out that said why something is important, right? The idea of research and data backing up the reason to do something. It's a different part of the brain versus when you shift into implementation. How to do something, what to do. In fact, it's a different part of the brain that you cannot actually use the same part at the same time. And I love that research because I'm sure all of you at some point, everyone here, you're practitioners. You face that challenge where you're having a conversation that's in theory, theoretical, and then someone's trying to implement, and it's getting frustrating going back and forth, and your mind's spinning. And the research came out saying the brain operates where one is talking about the why. It cannot think about the how and the what. And when you do the opposite, you can't think about the why. So that was a illuminating thing for me to realize that's where I feel psycho. So how to separate that. So I'm going to touch really lightly on the why before we go more into the how and what to do. But the notion of the hard skills, all the training done in most organizations, because a lot of doers, versus moving to soft skills, the thinking, and designing it differently. This is a slide where they were talking about only 15% of companies have plans. We're not even talking about execution. And who knows if plans even are good? Because you never know until you execute it. Only 15% have plans to figure out how to take their staff, their people, to bring them into the newer skills because every job is being replaced left and right. So let me show you a video really quick. It traveled towards the end of last year. It's a video clip from the World Economic Forum. It's one of the bigger forums globally where the leadership of the global, everyone just kind of comes and meets. So UK and volume hopefully is all good. If not, we always say if you can't hear it out there, just wave your hands and we'll see you in the video screen. So let you go ahead. don't know if you guys caught that. The Navy was part of that study, which is kind of cool. So I don't know what role they played, but so I forgot. So that this video traveled towards end of last year. Last night, I noticed the video actually was published February of 2017, 2 years ago. And it's crazy. It traveled around last year, almost 2 years after it was published. And I thought it literally was published toward the end of last year. That's when it traveled through the internet. But that's kind of crazy. And in the technology world, when they put things like 2030, 2030 is simply illustrated to say, it's far out enough that I can't tell you the exact date, but it's coming. And in technology, things come faster usually. And oftentimes people get the predictions wrong, but when things start to happen, it starts to happen even bigger and faster. So going back really quick, in the first day, it's kind of the diagram we drew, the idea of the talent war and where it hurts the most is occurring right here in this middle group called next-gen leadership. Centennials and millennials. In fact, we made this slide initially. I think now the oldest millennial's 38. The mid-level leaders, the organizations across the globe are struggling to retain that group. And in the military, we hear this term a lot. Does the inventory match the requirement? It's fascinating. You think of people as the inventory, but inventory usually is a static thing. And that's the unique thing about people, unlike machines. The inventory has the ability to upgrade, but also downgrade. And it's an organic thing that if you work in this older version of the org, where the majority were doers and very few thinkers, you're operating very differently because that is actually how you succeeded. So I took a picture of the first day slide, right? And if you recall, sorry, it's a little bent. What changed in the world? Speed, right? The notion that information, whether ranging from news, even that video, it didn't even dawn on me 2 years ago, is actually when it was produced, and how that impacts your need to act, make a decision. If you get the information, you have a responsibility to do something. And then we can play the card of, well, I didn't have all the information. Well, here's the interesting part. Everyone's got a piece of the puzzle. Information is almost like a map, where not everyone has enough pieces to see clarity, but amongst your team, your colleagues, the full picture, at least enough information is there to make a decision, act. So I want to share with you kind of the importance of this notion of 10% bad, 90% good. And Megan and I had the fortune last year being keynote speakers at the biggest conference in the Air Force called NCLS. So we're the keynote speakers. In the process, I met some other speakers in other workshops. And one was a woman named Brenda Tracy. I don't know if you've heard of her name. She's known and got quite widely I guess, recognized, public coverage, where I think it's around 20 years ago, she was gang raped for 6 hours by football players down south. And national coverage in the whole 9 yards. And she gave a talk that was just an awesome talk. But she talked about the reality that sexual assault is done predominantly by men. And she talked about sexual assault is done by approximately 10% of men. And she realized after all her pain, turmoil, and trying to fight for this in every way possible, that it is a maddening job trying to get the 10% bad people to try to not be bad. She said that I stopped getting angry at the fact that bad people did bad things. And I started to get angry about something else. I started to get angry that the 90% good people did nothing. The 10% bad, you shouldn't be surprised when they do bad things. But it's the 90% good doing nothing that is the bigger surprise. So let me show you another quick video that traveled around the internet towards the end of last year. And this is a short clip that traveled around Twitter. It's a high school kid, I believe, in London, where he's being bullied at school for being Middle Eastern. And so was his sister. So just want you to watch the two videos real quick.
Say no then. Nothing. Say no then. Nothing. Say no then. Say no then. Say no then. Fuck, say no then. Eh? Eh? Come here, you little bastard. Come here, you little bastard. Little bastard, I'll drown you. Oh, you want me to fucking drown you? What the fuck? You're gonna come over and slap me.
What the fuck is it? What did behind the loud bitch! Oh! Yeah, fucking Glenn! Alicia! Come on!
That's his sister. And if you watch the video again, you'd see the first boy, his arm was broken from earlier bullying episodes. He's standing there alone, and the other kid is pouring water on his face to act like it's waterboarding, telling him to, get out of this country. I mean, everything terrible you can imagine. For every one person doing something bad, there's 10 times the number of people standing around who are good. The number of people that surrounded the boy being bullied. The sister, same thing. You just look at the video, there's 10 times the number of good surrounding the one person doing bad.
Can I just add in? I think the first time, I think most people watch that video, it's very hard to watch. And we watched it a few times, but the first reaction is to think about, how do you punish that kid who did that? You're thinking about, how does that child, how do you find a way to make that go? How does he get punished? It's sort of focusing on him. But when you watch it again, and if you emphasize looking at everybody who's watching, the fact that somebody's even videotaping it, but everybody is watching and doing nothing. That's the part, that's the 90% good. Mm-hmm. But, usually when you watch it, you're thinking about, how do you punish that person? How does he get away with that? Is usually where the mental energy, goes into.
If you think of what's happening, and even in this instant, the schools being criticized, the schools now making, rules and like, I think the kid got expelled, but then they want more, and then he's too young to be criminally punished, and then there's a story behind his background and whatnot. The entire focus goes on this left side. What happens in your organizations? You got compliance, you have rules, you have training of what not to do. When you become a leader, when you become a manager, the bulk of management training in most companies is this stuff on the left. And it's not to say that isn't important, but we talked about balance and imbalance. Every organization's imbalance on this left side. And then you look at every metric that exists. This isn't enough. Playing defense alone is not enough. You're not winning this game, this fight. You have to play offense. But what you have to recognize is this, the 90% good. You might feel this too. We get your On My Mind emails, and we get a chance to have conversations after meals, get notes going through and the reflections occurring this morning. I know you feel overwhelmed. Maybe some of you are probably thinking, I have pages of notes, but I can't tell what I missed, what I didn't miss. You're feeling overwhelmed, and as you get overwhelmed with information, what ends up happening is paralysis will set in. Now, some of you will be like I'm just going to go and just charge out and do a lot of things. There's a caution there. Not only the first attempt, increase second attempt, but there is something that we learned in biology that's fascinating. They said in biology, you have to change things only at a rate of 2% at a time to start. You can accelerate as people's learning curves grow, but 2% at a time, and you must preserve 98% of your original DNA. Otherwise, the organism will reject it. So unlike machines, humans work differently. You need to start with 2%, and so then what is that 2%? The sequence matters. Why would you start with a thing that comes in step 10? And so the 2% notion, if you translate the math, translates to, they say there's roughly 22 business days in a month. If you do the math, the number of hours people work, 2% a month equates to roughly 1 hour a week. If you start by injecting a change that's greater than 1 hour a week, the highest likelihood is that you will overwhelm and you will get your organization and its people around to reject whatever you're doing, even if it's right. Now, once it starts working and people get hungry, you can start to accelerate that. Now, you don't want to go from 2 to 100, but you can start to accelerate it. Our academy is designed deliberately to get you hungrier for what to do. We got notes this morning, even from our team in London, saying we should have flipped it around, show how things will fail today, but show the implementation yesterday. And I explained to them, no, it was deliberately set up this way. Imagine if I told you I have a new exercise I want you to try. It requires hanging upside down. Someone will throw you. You have to trust they will catch you, right? First questions to your head, have you done this before? Has anyone got hurt? You start to want to know the diligence questions before I'm willing to listen. And this is the interesting part about the notion of students and coaching. We think just because I have knowledge to impart, and this is important, you must listen, the student is taking it. People take advice when they're ready for it. And so as difficult as it is for us in a window of strangers that we've never met to try to create the 3 days for you to build up not only knowledge, skepticism, choose the first part to get the why, keep reminding you, but then getting you hungry enough, hopefully, for how and what to do was the way it's designed. And I hope for at least some of you, it works out this way, right? Going back to this notion, I wasn't just to share this now, Kareem. I understand just a few minutes ago, or there's a bad accident that happened that you were informed on, and there's something that, I'm assuming by your head shaking, don't share it, right? But there's something that I found very helpful. We got this from a principal of a school, and it was the notion of integrity. I know in the Air Force, one of your values is integrity. In integrity, we think of the days when we are our best self, right? We don't think of integrity really as our bad selves, right? The worst selves. And they shared this research component. It's called espouse theory versus theory in use. The espouse theory is what you believe, like the best days, the best versions of you are. Theory in use is what you actually do. And oftentimes, those bad versions of ourselves, the worst of us, we have a way to excuse it. It's because I didn't sleep. It's because I'm hungry, right? I'm uncomfortable. It's because I got a bad review at work, which is why I'm so mean at home. And you like to think that that's discounted out, and that's not really me. The real me is when I was up there getting recognized, got that medal, right? And I saved someone's career, life, whatnot. That is me. And what I love that this principal shared was that human beings are schizo. Both things are true. And how to actually reconcile and accept that both the best of me and the worst of me are both me. And we have all of that. And integrity is the distance between those two. And integrity is not a static state. It is a moving target that when you are working consistently to close that gap, your integrity is trending up. But just like exercise with muscles, if you do not exercise consistently, muscles atrophy. Integrity gets worse and worse. But the hardest thing to do when you go through this exercise is to think about, what does the bad version of me look like? Can I accept it? Because I don't want anyone to see it, right? Like, God forbid someone finds out, they'd say, you have no integrity is what happens. You get labeled. That's by definition what they call a fixed mindset. It can't change. Once I've discovered your character, once I've discovered your integrity, you have it or you don't. Versus we all have a gap that is always moving. And why I share this is what we built in the On My Mind exercises, and we'll walk you through both technology and non-technology ways to do this, is that, another value in the Air Force is excellence. Excellence for human beings is different than machines. For machines, right, even for our website, we have 99.9 something % reliability. We have these service level agreements, and that is what they call excellence. You're allowed a fraction of a percentage to have downtime or errors. But for human beings, excellence, majority needs to be excellent, and that's 51% is majority. That means up to 49%, you need the space to let your other half show up. Failing, experimenting. Like I said, you want to learn anything new, the notion of investment and loss. You cannot get better without making that investment and loss. We'll give you a copy of Josh Waitzkin's book, The Chess Player, the Martial Arts Player. And there's a great section where he explains what investment and loss is. By the way, losing is not an investment and loss. An investment and loss is when you deliberately try something difficult, as in you choose to step up to the plate, not pulled like a donkey by somebody else, but you choose to step up, take a risk, and it doesn't work out. That's an investment and loss. I know in the school, Larry, I think it sounds like you're going to try TP version 4, right? After this session, you have invested and lost at TP version 1, 2, and 3, and you are ahead of most people for doing that. I know it feels like, oh God, I don't have like maybe my credibility shot. Here I am now coming in, because you know what happens when you try something once and it works? You got lucky. I am being dead serious. Because you know what happens when someone says, how did it work? And you listen to anyone who had a one-hit wonder, first time tried. They won't be able to tell you any insight except for it just worked. Just try it. And then when it doesn't work, they scratch their heads wondering and it must be the situation. It must be you. It worked for me, right? And you'll see the light, like the 2 inches of depth they have of explaining the nuances of like how it works, what to do. Experience comes literally from doing it wrong. The notion that I had a mentor say, there's no, oh my gods, no mistakes, only lessons learned. You have to change this mindset that when you get it wrong, it is building muscle. The CEO of Airbnb, they're in the process of going public. They talk about the notion of building muscle. The things that you struggle is where you have the greatest muscle building, because when you overcome it is when the muscle is working. But anything you got too easy, they have no muscle. Their biggest fear, their risk listed towards their IPO security is that they're not muscled enough in getting listings. The reason why Airbnb worked, the idea of strangers staying in your house, right? Because after the financial crash, everyone needed to find a way to make more money with the current assets you have. And that business was about to die, but after that 2008 crash, in 2009, the business took off. So they say they have very little muscle in that part of the business. To think of muscle as strength, when you are overcoming the challenges, it is absolutely the insights of what you can teach. So you are further ahead because as you go to TP version 4, you will be better at it. So integrity, making mistakes, excellence. To be human and excellent is different than to be a machine and excellence. And you have to appreciate and understand learning occurs by first doing bad. If you got it right the first try, if you ever see, a gymnast, a golfer, you name anything you've tried, and you get it right from the get-go, I worry for those people. Because then all the coaches and experts kind of walk away, and the first time they hit struggle, the downward spiral occurs. Then comes the shame, just awful stuff will happen. And how do you build an environment? All types of accidents are occurring everywhere. How do you build an environment that is normal? There was the last academy for Navy, I think it was enlisted. If you do something bad, there's a thing with a red stripe you get. I can't remember what it was called, but he showed me a picture where basically for almost 9 years or 7 years, every picture he has this velvet stripe. It's like a scarlet letter, right? I thought he was joking. Have you heard this thing? Right. So if you have bad conduct, right, and it shows up in your evaluation, every single uniform picture has this giant scarlet letter, red stripe. No, he had it here. It was big when he showed me his picture. He showed me his picture, and I was like, he looked like a Miss USA pageant. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And he explained how he has to wear it for 12 years, and he was about to get it off. And he explained how, I think he was a Navy guy, how Richardson, the CNO, saved his life, his career, where it told him to go keep trying and prove that you can make it. And now he's on a fast track, has surpassed everyone, but still on these pictures, he still has his red thing, and it's about to come off, I think, in a year. And so we had shared with the head of HR at the Navy, Bob Burke, and the team, you need to change this. You need to find a way to celebrate this. The fact that this guy did that bad and held it for that long and is doing this well, he should be coaching every individual with a red stripe and walk them through how to win. So I think they featured some article and they're trying to do something, a story on it. But it's this notion of how do you get people to embrace the fact that we make mistakes. Accidents happen. But the thing that we're doing, coming from the elephant age, is that we are expecting 99.96% excellence and perfection. And that is what we should expect out of machines. Putting that same metric where, once again, the majority of the people were doers there, right? They were almost a part of the machine. In fact, industrial was defined as people were just literally a piece of the machine. So when someone didn't work out, you just got rid of them and put someone else in and sit in that desk. That literally was just churning them out like that. It's a different world. And just to recognize that change and what it's doing and where things are coming from. So, quick. This here. London, you guys can see this hopefully? All right. There's a lot of questions that are being asked on how do I do it, implement, and I think Tom, hopefully, and Greg shared, our team is building this 2-inch thick manual, and I think the benefit of what we did with this whole project and taking on the Navy to do this is if you want to help an organization with 640,000 people, right? I was explaining to Larry last night for the education side, he's like, oh, we got this wrong, and my very monkey arrogant way, I was like, you didn't take good notes because we told you everything to do, but honestly, it's not your fault because there's 36 steps and those broken up into 3 different sections, each one leveled, and you have to have time frames in between because you can't rush all 36 steps at once. There's so many different steps that it is in our know-how. We've seen what works and doesn't work coming back for other companies. And so as we were doing this to the Navy, we realized we need to paper this thing for them. There's no way that they can actually remember all this, and working with 5,000 different commands and 640,000 people, everyone's going to get it wrong. And we saw that, but when we did pro bono help constantly, it was a lot easier just to help, and people were like grateful for the help, and they'll get stuck and come back and then get the next 6 steps and then come back. So the team built, and we have copies of this book, What to Expect When You Expect, right? The most popular book for having kids or babies. And we're building the same thing. What to expect when you turn the lights on, right? And you get truth with feedback. What to expect when you start coaching the next generation of leaders. What to expect, all the different aspects. Month 1, month 2, and so forth. But I'll just give you the high level component that is kind of important of these first 2 steps. So one is tied to truth. Another one's tied to coaching. And I think we mentioned again and again, truth representing information, and coaching, because there's a lot of different types of coaching. We're not talking about coaching you for getting stronger biceps. That's a different kind of coaching. We don't do here. We do, but not in this academy right now. At the highest level, when you think of level 1, level 2, level 3, it starts with feedback. Feedback representing intuition, training people to start to share their judgment, their intuition, no matter how partial it is. People we've had a lot of people practice giving feedback and they say, I just can't type that fast. And I was like, not true. We found that you can give feedback at a rate of 1 minute per person. Meaning if I give you 10 minutes, you're going to give feedback in this room instantly to 10 people, no matter how bad your thumbs are at typing. That's how fast it should happen. We found out the more time you got, you will actually talk yourself logically out of giving the truth of what you felt. And you'll go into this, well, if it was me, I wouldn't want people to say it that way. Oh, you know what? Like, Then empathy can sit in, or I mean, different aspects. Well, I can get in trouble if somehow found out eventually it was me. So politically correct filtering comes in. Before you know it, you're like, you forgot what it was. But as Sri Kumar said, good thing, bad thing, we have a visceral reaction. And then there are people saying, I just can't process that fast. And my reaction is, wow, do you recognize how weak your muscles are in this? You are telling me you're unable to process and share your intuition as if you have no voice, no point of view. It is not true. Every person has a point of view, an independent thought. We have just trained ourselves to suppress it. And the muscle of suppressing it is stronger than the muscle of actually sharing it. And so with practice, you can balance that back out. We are regurgitating most of the time what we have taken in. What you read, you watched in video, you were told, and you're literally thinking in your head, what do I say that's the right thing to say? What do I say to sound smart? What do I say doesn't get me in trouble? And that filter is shutting down your ability to process what's actually happening in your intuition. You know, the old adage of like, don't bring me a problem unless you have a solution? Oh, that's great for the elephant age. It's awful for this cheetah age. Because like I said in the beginning, I might have a piece of the puzzle to the problem, you might have a piece, and you might have a piece, but only if we all put it on a table, maybe could somebody else who knows how to solve it, solve it. And the speed of this happening is so critical because the same person does not have to have the whole enchilada of information, and the same person does not have to be the one that actions. And then remember the 7+, it takes a string of 7 things going wrong for an accident to actually happen. It takes 7 things going right for innovation to occur. So you need both sides. So feedback is the basis of actually starting, and then in coaching, this LBR. I know we had you do it. I feel the sleep class we tried, but I have a sense Spin did some of it, or the workouts, and then the overnight sleep. It's amazing what it does. But L stands for bring it to light. B is the break. The real insight is the R, the revisit. Negative things we don't like to revisit, right? You know when people say postmortems, right, after meetings or events, or reflection, it's a fancy word for revisit the difficult stuff, right? It's not a postmortem if it's about all the things you did well. Usually that's what we call champagne and partying, right? Like the recognition. Postmortems, right? I mean, it sounds grim, is literally like what went wrong. When we talk about reflection, usually people are talking about what went wrong and what lessons did we learn, not like, wow, I learned how great I was, right? I learned how awesome we were, and I learned that we need to buy a hell of a lot more champagne because this is just awesome. There is a place for that. We will show you what Coronitos looks like end of the day today. But most of the time, 95% of our life is mostly in the grind. So monotony is the bulk of it. But then just like the 5% is when you really win, there's the 5% where it's really bad. Like it seems like being pummeled by bad upon bad. But the majority of life is kind of in the middle, but it's going nowhere. And the problem is this. I love this image that Robert Keegan had shared, Harvard professor, that when you look at human beings, right, we are designed to grow, always grow. And we use this visual of a plant. If you see a plant, day one looks this tall. You come 30 days later, same height. You come like 3 years later, it's the same height. And you know what you said? Something's wrong. I think it might be dead underneath. You're supposed to grow. And so this is the danger of monotony. There's another way Jim Lear put it I loved, where he said that, you know, when you play it safe, right, you're kind of like staying right in the middle. And he said living is like when you go to the hospital and you see this machine that goes up and down. What do you think when you see that machine go flat? Living is stressing and recovering, oscillating between succeeding and losing. And it might sum up to 50-50 in the middle. But when you are playing it safe, getting more constrained, going in the middle, and I hope the exercise we did in the dance was illustrative physically. As soon as we gave you the half truth, half the information. If you looked at what everyone did, everyone started to move less. You got more constrained. I might get hurt, I might hurt somebody else, and everyone literally just kind of caved in. Then we took the eye patch off, and that next song I was explaining to Megan, I don't know if it's just because a lot of military folks here, you guys are marching and beat, and there was laughter, there was the energy lift you could feel. The difference between half truth and getting the full truth is quite a big difference. You hopefully felt in the dance. But I bring this notion of LBR because we don't like to revisit negative stuff. And that is something that is more crippling than you realize. And because we like to act like it's not true, it's not happening, you know what we like to do instead is find techniques, build muscle of how to cover up, hide, not think about that negative stuff. And that thing that you start doing is what is called LHF. There's a baseball with, it's kind of like a no smoking sign, but it says no LHF, which please take one if you don't have one. Megan coined this term, and then she drew this image once. We took a picture and put it on baseballs. If you remember Moneyball for baseball, right? What is that killer metric? What is that thing that actually the money metric that makes success happen? And in baseball, Billy Beane and the Oakland A's, they figured out it was the on-base percentage. That everyone measures RBIs, right? And then, of course, errors and all that stuff. But the most important metric that the people weren't measuring, the money metric, which they call Moneyball, was just measuring what percentage of people got on base. That meant that the non-glorious way to get on base is oftentimes don't even take a swing, have that discipline and patience, and just get a walk. But baseball wasn't giving credit to people for walks. You got credit for scoring through hits, right? And then you got dinged for making errors. What we found in decision-making, the money metric to measure and see was LHF. If you don't know how to measure it, just try to count how many eggshells are in any situation, and you will see whether you have a lot or little of LHFing. But the reason we LHF is because we don't like the bad stuff. We don't like to think about it. We don't want to revisit it, right? It feels like someone's torturing you, having you watch the bad things, having you talk about the bad things. How many times have you done that? Can we stop talking about this? It's depressing, right? Like, I got it, okay? I made a mistake. I am sorry. That's literally us saying, it's poison. I don't want it. Negative emotions, negative situations, mistakes I made, bad. I need to move on. And then what ends up happening, and I love Jim Fadigan, the Sesame Street guy, said, we build what they call bad brain habits. It's fascinating the mental models we carry around in our heads. We think it's the models to win, to play offense. It's not the case. More of us have mental models of how not to lose, how to not look bad. And so anything you've experienced that's negative and bad, we walk away remembering traumatic elements of it, and you have built models, whether you recognize it or not, to avoid that from ever happening, because it could be the end of you. Whether it's the end of a relationship, whether it's the end of a career, it could be the end of you. So we build these models, and the problem is this: it's not tested. This notion that, is it possible your model is flawed? Is it possible you took the wrong lesson, the wrong insight? Is it possible that the time has changed? That the time you got chewed out before was before we started to move into this AI information age? It's before everyone walked around with a supercomputer in their hands. And when you say, like, I can't tell you this information, everyone's like, screw you. I'm going to Google it and I'll find it myself. And then they'll say, you're wrong. It's a different time. So we have models baked in our heads, shared by leadership, passing down without recognizing a lot of them are broken. And bad brain habits that come. The biggest one is the skills of playing poker. Coming to everything we do, bluffing. Trying to look good. Trying to dupe out everybody else. When I'm in pain, I'm fine. I'm stronger than this. And when I'm, maybe like overly happy, people find different ways to do this. And so the act of LBR as a practice will help, because I always say when something bad happens, you get criticized. The first time, if you're here, got feedback, you'll see it's like a ball of charcoal. When you buy those things and you light it on fire, It's already filled with kerosene. So just that's the L, right? I think, Scott, you felt L yesterday after the oboe. You have a break, right? I hope if you haven't, you revisit this with your TP today. It's still hot. It still hurts. But when the flame dies down, where it's not blazing, but it's down, while it's still fresh, you will start to find the pearls of wisdom. Brene Brown, amazing individual we got to know and helped her coach her team to build our business better. And it's fascinating what she said. There are so few good advice givers out there. So few. It is not upon the coach or the advice giver, the teacher, to give you good advice. The job is on the receiver to find the pearls of wisdom. It is your job as the receiver to figure out what is good and bad advice and recognize 99% or more of advice is bad. And if you don't believe that, you just haven't been around long enough. You haven't tried stuff to recognize, as Greg said in the coaching, I thought I was a great coach until I see them 2 weeks later. Then 2 weeks later, I start to realize, wait, it's as if this meeting never happened. I wasted my time and their time. So the revisiting, the R, and the situation workshop, situation workshop, I got a little scold from my editor. But the situation workshop, I want to share this, kind of important, I think. A lot of things I think are important, but it's my opinion, my independent thought, right? They say to be happy, the number one thing people have to do is gratitude exercises. And every day, at the end of the day, do a gratitude exercise. What are you grateful for? 3 things you're grateful for. And I remember like hearing this in the research, and I was like, that sounds so hokey. That can't be the best thing to do. There's got to be other things. How about building muscles and getting stronger physically, learning technical skills to use like coding or Excel? There must be other things that make people happier, make more money, right? Instead, gratitude is the top thing. There's gratitude exercise every day. But then when we spent more time and dug deeper into the research, they say the reason why it works is this. Because I have homework at the end of the day to actually come up with 3 things that I'm grateful for, I spend all day looking for what I'm going to be grateful for. And that exercise is what makes you happier. We did the opposite with situational workshops. Do the math here, right? Every individual in NextJump is a student every 2 weeks in a situational workshop. Every week, they're a coach, which is why we have run out of people. At a ratio of 2 to 8, if you do that ratio where you're being a student every other week, but a coach every week, you run out of people, which is why we actually had to start coaching external people. That thing scales pretty damn fast. But here's what's happening that people don't realize. The entire 2 weeks, I am trying to spend time figuring out what situation I'm going to bring up. And you heard people say my number one, that was my second situation, right? And everyone has a priority number 1 and number 2. You're spending 2 weeks going through things that are difficult, that are challenging, looking for what I will bring up in my situational workshop. This is the power of a ritual, of a rhythm. And when something worse happens, that's going to be my number 1. And instead of doing the, oh my God, it's like, no, that's going to trump the number 1 I had. And everyone is doing that. And then a great coach will say, this is not a Q&A. This is a reflective exercise. It's like seeing a therapist. They say, so what happened last week? They don't start with, what are you pondering about life? It's what happened last week is how they all begin conversations. So what difficulty did you action, as in try something, the decision? And they're talking about what they felt didn't turn out so well. And they're asking for guidance, opinions of 2 people who have more experience going around the sun a few more times. And that's literally what is happening. And so you're trained when you see difficulty to act, right? Because you can't bring it up. Because they're going to say, now bring up something, that's a question. I want to know something you did something on. So suddenly you're training everyone to take action and to actually identify the most difficult number 1 and number 2. And your list is changing with more difficulty. Oh, that's a better one. So see what just happened? The psychology was, instead of, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. No, that's a better situation. And suddenly the taboo, that negative, the thing that's taking our memory buffer, trying to hide, is now normal. They say when you train CFOs, they're trained because, to make a difference as a CFO, you have to cut down the big expenses. But they say they always miss the big ones. As soon as you miss, you're like, oh God, we missed that again. They're trained to catch all the little expenses. And when you get into the ritual and habit of doing that, you also catch the big ones. You have this everywhere. In every organization, they do the speak up when you need help, right? When you see something, say something. How well does that work for you? It doesn't work because when they need it, they don't even know how to act, how to do it. But if you get them in a ritual practicing on the smallest little things, when the big thing shows up, boom, they already have a program, a ritual that is baked in to bring it up, baked in to get help from someone with other experience, baked in to have a study group, a coaching group. That is what ritual is. But so I bring this up. I'm sorry, I went to a tangent. But level 2 is when so here's the part people struggle with. Level 1 simply is get in the arena. Now, a lot of people, because we all come still remembering strongly the elephant industrial age, do the reps. Struggle with this advice. Talk to any great sports coach. Before they start guiding and coaching, they always say, get on the field. I want to see you play. Because level 2 is when expert guidance is added on top. You need to understand, and I'm going to show you a slide in a second, called the blue dot, where the starting point is. And this is where a program called 10X comes in, which is around expert guidance. This is where situational workshops and OMMs show up, which is all tied to now adding expert guidance. When you move to level 3, it gets more complex now, using the power of data and analytics and figuring out a way to not help senior management figure out what's happening with you, but to help you understand what's happening with you. Help your team understand what's happening, because we have a poor memory of the past. It's auditing with what happened with you and showing you what actually happened, including the fact that 50% of the time, roughly 50%, we all have bad days. We all have negative emotions, and that is normal. So this piece, and then each part, of course, goes into detail where situational workshops, they all have like multiple levels, month by month, of how to progress. And then there's the typical track, and then if there's an accelerated track, and then there's a slower track, depending on how fast people pick up. So the situational workshop you did, we just had you go do it, right? And it's interesting because next jumpers are good students, meaning they're practiced in this. You'll find it easier because they're more authentic. They're better at being vulnerable, not LHFing. They're better at giving not questions, but actually situations they tried something on. They're better at giving you the toughest thing to struggle with that week, no matter how silly it might sound. But when you start, you're going to see it's going to be bad coaches multiplied by bad students, right? So which one do you start with? We start with training the coaches. You're going to actually usually coach alone as opposed to with 2 people. You're going to end up asking for 2 situations each. So because like playing anything, playing poker, flying planes, you need to put the reps in, the hours, to see a lot of situations before you start to see patterns. And you're going to do this not once, but 3 times minimum. Minimal, not maximum. And what's baked into that is this magical thing that we all tend to forget about is time. Time gives us perspective like nothing else. Did it work? Did it not work? I don't know. Time will tell you. And when it comes to people, time is different than machines. Did it work? Did it not work? With engineers, they tell us within seconds, minutes. People, things take longer. So there are different elements of that, but can I, oh, sorry, I'll do this. Sorry if I'm falling behind. I'm not totally. Once again, if you need bio breaks, snacks, just do it. Right? Can I go back to the PowerPoint? Yeah. Okay, they're going to share the screen. Okay. You have to 12. Right? Okay. So shared? Okay, so management tools. I'm going to take you through some of the tools because a lot of the questions are how do you scale? How do you do this kind of not? I think a lot of people probably will walk away saying, I think this really helped me. It might help me with my family, my spouse. It might help me just kind of maybe with my one coworker. But this notion of changing the entire enterprise is a different game. It's an absolutely different game. And suddenly process, sequence, tools start to play a very different role. But we'll teach you how to do it with no tools. Even at scale, we'll teach you how to do it with tools. By the way, the idea of the blue dot. We've all used GPS at this point, right? I don't think people ever travel now without doing GPS. And here's what we spend too much time when we do coaching. Where do I want to go? The purpose, the vision, the why, right? Like kind of, can you visualize success? This exercise is a lot easier and a lot faster than the other exercise. 5% is what we found roughly. The time and energy it takes to figure the destination out. The hardest thing is where I am now. Now, because we are always moving, right? You'll see by tomorrow morning, you're going to be in a different spot, right? The starting point is the hardest thing to figure out. Now, if you ever drive, right, on either Waze or Google Maps or whatever you use, and you know the destination and you're driving and following the blue dot, what happens when the dot starts jumping? Right? Have you ever had it where the dot is like on a building and you're like, I'm not on the building, right? Or it's in the water, it's jumping, and literally, what do you do when that happens? It drives you crazy, but usually most people pull over and stop. You can't move until the blue dot figures out where you are. It's like a crazy thing. We don't have the signal to understand where I am right now. As a result of it, we stop moving. Figuring out the blue dot is actually one of the hardest things for us to do. Even at an enterprise level, the reason why the first thing starts with get in the arena, do the reps, is because you're trying to figure out the blue dot of your team, of your enterprise right now. You need to know how bad or decent they are in giving feedback. And most people say they're bad. I'm like, are you surprised? You have very few rituals, very few practices. None of them are consistent, right? Everyone gets an A for a workshop, but as soon as they go back to regular life, they're not so good. Coaching, right? Are you surprised you have a lot of bad coaches? Well, there's no training program. It's not consistent. And you have to recognize the solution for most of these things almost always falls in intensity. Everything is always down to intensity, right? Which I'll talk about in a second. But blue dot, probably one of the most important things. Before I go into some of the tools, I want to show you this. This came from the Economic Forum, and basically the top two things that every CEO worked out and kind of figured out is this. The number one issue at a global level for almost every place, every company and organization is the failure to attract, retain talent. And all the subpoints underneath it are all tied to talent, right? Innovation is tied to talent. You know, you don't make enough profits is tied to talent. New competitors tied to talent. And then the second thing is actually developing next generation of leaders. I need more owners, not renters. I need more decision makers. But what we learned and found was this. When you do what looked like number two, the best, number one takes care of itself. Meaning, if you watch sports teams, you watch hospitals, you watch anything, when they are the best at training talent, players join them. Doctors join them for less pay because they say, I learn more here, which means my future value is going to be higher. You retain better, you attract better talent. So developing this group is actually number one. And this, once again, is where the theory and practice tend to be different. This is where when surveys come out, they say that, but it takes practitioners in a lot of detail, making a lot of mistakes to understand in implementation, sequence can be different. I love this phrase I heard from Roger Martin, the guy who's best known for strategy. Strategy cannot be divorced from execution. I'm sure all of you have been in a meeting where someone says, that was such good strategy, but it didn't work, right? That was such a good plan. We did all the research. It should have worked, but it didn't work. You got to start to redefine that. If the strategy cannot be executed well, it is bad strategy. And you know where strategy falls apart for almost every organization now? It falls apart on people, right? I made an assumption that everyone's going to do exactly what I put down, and they didn't do it, right? I had this conversation with Larry last night. He was saying, oh my God, coming for the third time to the academy now, I picked up the nuance what we did wrong. And my response is, you didn't follow protocol. We gave it to you, but you didn't follow it, right? So whose fault is that? We didn't give him good strategy. Because if it doesn't execute, we say proof is in the adoption. Proof is after the plan is running, if it was a good plan or not. Not the writer of the plan saying, this is a fantastic plan, best strategy in the world. Let's see it. Let's put it to the test. That's the world of practitioners. So strategy cannot be divorced from execution, and people, biggest challenge on it. I pulled up the slide. So we work with a lot of different bankers, and the head of tech banking gave us this slide, which is a map of all of HR technology today. And the part he mapped out was that the second bullet, you can barely read, said, there's a huge gap, though, is that large cap companies, as in the biggest companies in the world in HR tech, have yet to build or acquire emerging technologies in HR. And the area that, you can't read all this well, but the area I'm trying to point to is what they call talent management, right here. So talent management includes performance management tools, engagement surveys, training and learning management, compensation management, recognition. There's a bunch of other tools. And so I'm going to walk you through how, I can put it over. Okay. Okay for time, but that's usually how the reporter feels, not the audience. That's right. Talking to myself, but all right. Old management tools versus new management tools. There's a new class of management tools. The old management tool was built top down. They're all top down tools. They're top down tools to empower senior management with information to make the right calls. And in the elephant industrial age, they didn't have to make as many calls. And there's a lot less information too. In the 21st century, cheetah age, it is moving so damn fast. Not only do you get more information, you need to make the calls that much faster, which is why every senior leader we talked to said, it is impossible. My job is impossible. And when you talk to the junior folks, you know what they say? I don't want their job. They see how stressed they are. They see how much, literally, they take a chance and they get brutalized, whether it's on social media, internet, by HR compliance. Nobody wants that job. We hear this all the time from so many places. Instead of top down, I want you to think about community tools. I want you to think about how do I start to play offense? No more defense. Not because you're not going to stop. Trust me, it's an elephant. You can't stop the defense investments. But you cannot win this war unless you there's 10 good people for every one bad, or 9 good for every one bad. 10 times the number. How do you bring them to the battle? How do you bring the good? Because when the good show up, they're the cavalry. The odds flip dramatically in your favor. Because trying to stop the bad from doing bad with rules being written by 2% or less of senior leaders is not enough. You have to do it, but its imbalance is not enough. So we think about the new management as community tools. How do you train and empower the community with both information and ways to act? So when you think about information, the most common piece of information is system 2, right? That's the whole logical analytical dashboards. And that's what management uses to make decisions. But what's missing is system 1, collective intuition. It's the eye patch when you were dancing. You're seeing half the information. But when they get the other half, not only the management, now everyone is part of management. Isn't the thing that you now have to learn how to manage yourself? You have to learn how to manage other people. You have to manage people above you, below you, colleagues, collaboration. Big thing. You got to do team. At the same time, you have to learn how to manage products. You have to learn how to manage metrics. You have to learn how to manage life at home. You have to learn how to manage children to aging parents, the whole gamut, spouse included, everything. And I know people hate the word management. It's taboo against the word leadership now is the more popular word. In my view, it's the same freaking thing. It's semantics. Whether you lead, whether you manage, call it whatever the hell you will, right? But you got a lot more responsibility than you ever had, and you're expected to get it right. And when you have a team, Megan always says, many people, whatever it is, or many hands make light work. Yeah, many hands make light work, right? You'll be shocked how many hands, when they start kicking in, makes everything seem possible again that felt impossible. And so when you think about what's there right now today for information and talent management systems, right? These are some of the things that come to mind for me. You've got engagement surveys, which really is the doers fill it out, right? And the senior management gets to see with HR what actually is happening. Some call them climate surveys, right? So in the military, you want to get the climate of how the culture is working. Then you have these unit inspection reports. Think of any type of report that evaluates the entire team or the community or the enterprise. Then you end up having what they call performance evaluation reports, right? And what is a performance evaluation? Now you're getting out to individuals. And I want to assess how they're doing, all really for the eyes of the senior management, above all else. And yes, you get to see your own self-eval, but you know, this stuff, you can't see more than yours, right? Unless you're a manager. And if you go up, you can see other people's and someone sees yours and so forth. Hierarchy. It's built that way. Versus think about what happens in the bottom. Decision tools, promotion tools. Promotion is a huge decision, right? You have compensation tools. You have recognition tools. You have hiring tools. Once again, for who? Who's deciding the promotions? Who's deciding the compensation? Who's deciding the recognition? And who's deciding the hiring? They're built to work in the elephant structure. When the world moved at a different speed, there was less information, less decisions, and 2% or less could actually succeed in managing skeletal structures of enterprises built like an elephant, slow and steady. Move to this newer age. We're talking about now trying to get truth, the other half of the truth. We talked about the notion that how do you get everyone to, we said training everyone to tell and seek the truth. So I'm trying to, I apologize being repetitive back to day one, but I find day one, no one remembers what we do actually until you're past your full skepticism, which I don't expect you to be fully, but anyways, what ends up happening is this. The question you're trying to understand is who's operating in the dark. Who's operating in the dark with a tremendous amount of org silence versus who's operating in the light. Because as I mentioned before, operating in the light does not guarantee winning, does not guarantee high performance, but there's a very high correlation to low performing teams when you see org silence. When people are afraid to speak up, they don't speak up, and the feedback comes with what we call 0-calorie feedback, you know, GOAT, good, you know, not bad, right? Or like you'll see when people aren't taking risk, those teams are predictors of something bad about to happen. Versus the opposite is true, that they may not win, but they're not gonna likely be low performing teams. So that will show up in the analytics. Then we go to coaching, right, over here. And we talked about training the next generation of decision makers. Sorry if you can't, you can see some of this. But here's what happens in most organizations. Intensity is where this kind of stops. Intensity meaning you see leaders having one-hit wonders, and then they go in downward spirals, right? God, they were so good. They made such a good call, but then why can't they do it again? Then you start to actually focus on, well, how do we train them? So the only thing that gets done is, which onboarding is a big one, right? People invest heavily in onboarding. They invest in annual or some type of career checkpoint where you have to go for like extra training, right? Conferences, right? Because we're all excellent leaders and managers in conferences, patient and humble and open-minded, right? This matters, but you have to recognize This is approximately 5% of the career or less. And you know, there's a whole thing that they done studies about what makes the composition of human beings. 5% is tied to intensity, willpower, some would say. 95% is our everyday rituals and behaviors. That makes up more of who we are. And the two play together, by the way. It's not one or the other. And it's fascinating what we learned with some of the different fields, industries. So we work with some of the best boxing instructors. And I asked them, just hypothetical question, right? If boxers were trained in two different ways. One boxer was trained technically only, but never had a fight. One boxer only got ring time and never trained technically. So just kind of just in rings and sparring all the time. Who would win? And the instructor said, no, not even a question. Hands down, the person in the ring would win. But, right, and the reason is, by the way, if you ever see the Mike Tyson thing, I had a great plan until I got punched in the face, right? They forgot everything. So the person who technically trained, they're not used to taking the hit, right? That's the bad thing happening. The minute they got punched in the face, they forgot everything, went blank, which is why that experience matters. But here's the but. That person with ring time experience only will never become a pro without technical training. You need both, but they sequence on. When I drew that other slide, you start by doing the reps, which is getting in the ring time. Then you add the expert training, and that is the sequence of how you get trained. Versus think of what most people want to do. In fact, we see Academy, and people do, no. Shouldn't you give them instruction, tell them what to do? And people don't even want to start coaching, right? Can you give me the 1, 2, 3 steps? What should I think? What should I ask, right? We want instruction. That originates from the industrial age. Rules and instructions come from there. But to see what you do first, ring time, field experience, and then layer up technical training, that is how it needs to work. But the void that's occurring is this 95%. And there are little things that, you know, scheduling something 3 times instead of committing to it once. We tried the spin class, we did a dance class. You may have hated it. And I asked you, try it 3 times, then stop. It's amazing the second time you're like, wasn't as bad as I thought. The third time you're like, I'll give it a real investment in loss. I'm going to push myself. The first time I did spin class, I wasn't sure if I was going to die. And then they tell you this whole like, no, it's great because it's dark. It's up to you. You can go slower. A grandmother can do this, right? But you know what happens in team sports? I'm sure you all felt it. You feel the pressure to not be the one letting the team down. If someone's pedaling harder, I look around. I'm like, I don't even know who they are, but I'm going to keep up pedaling just as fast. And I might be hurt, but it's amazing what you will do, right? So, but there's a part where I'm scared. I don't know if I'm going to run out of gas, get hurt. The second time, I'm like, okay, I now know what it's like. I know the boundaries, right? What happens. So you might try something, but the third time, you're going to get a better sense of what it is. So the 3 times scheduling is one. The other part that we find that's important is 2 times a week minimum, not maximum, minimum. There's a reason why the On My Mind, when we do it, we usually say 2 times per week minimum. You can do it more. Remember I said in the bibs for offense, what matters? How you start and how you end anything makes a material difference. To get an emotional checkpoint at the start of the week after Monday's over, to get an emotional checkpoint at the end of the week, that is an incredibly valuable audit trail for yourself. It tells you more than trying to capture all kinds of data points in the middle. Those 2 data points minimum. If you want to do more, go ahead. But it doesn't count unless you actually get the ritual set. And in fact, what we say is this: it takes 13 weeks of consistency of something to say you did it, for you to upgrade. So given that the Marines only do 12 weeks, right? I'll give you a bye. You get to miss 1. So you better be careful which one you choose to miss. Imagine if you do work out twice a week minimum, right? You get to miss 1, right? Meaning if you miss that, if you get less than 2 in a week, workouts, which is workouts is a good analogy, your calendar starts again at 0, right? So to make it more human, we'll give you 1 time you can miss. So when you plan to miss, you better be thinking, I need to save this for a rainy day when I really do get the flu and can't do it. Otherwise, the counter starts again. And anyone who knows anything about goals, right? Monday is the most important day to hit that goal. If you hit Monday, now you have 4 days left, meaning you have an 80% chance of hitting your goal. Then if you miss Tuesday, you have a 60% chance, right? If you miss Wednesday, I still have a 40% chance. Like, you see how odds are still there that I can hit the second one. But if you miss Monday, you now have a 50-50 chance of hitting goal. During the work week, you got to hit at least one of the 4 days. Then if you miss another one, now you have a 33% chance of hitting goal. And if you miss one more, now you have to do every single one. The need to push yourself on Monday is key. So there's, once again, I know if you don't pick up the notes on this, it will be in the what to expect and all that good documentation. But I want you to understand why this is so different. In this old elephant world, there was 98 to 99% doers. Versus now, we have approximately 100% thinkers, which is think about awareness, information, but they're also approximately 100% doers. You need to act as well. Things are different. Things are different, and I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm trying to help you understand why things are the way they are. And it comes from past success, biology. It did work this other way. But when times have changed, you need to start operating differently as well. So, coming back to, oh, sorry. I'm trying to have a few more. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Waiting for. Right. I think you have to give me that control. Almost done. I only have a few slides. This is something we mapped out a while back. I think they have a cleaner version of my handwriting here. The blueprint of building decision makers, this next generation of decision makers, and the order of it, the sequence. This is 10 years watching other companies when we gave them everything, what naturally worked and did not work in what sequence. Feedback is the foundation because you need to first create an environment of truth. But shortly after, you need coaching. Then it goes into hiring, recognition, performance, sales, promotions. Wellness and giving came up later. Collaboration, the whole person's all in there. And we found that this is the foundation to build the human radar system. Remember, we have radar to everything else in computers, human beings. Then coaching in many ways is the recovery, the place to deal with the bad stuff, to get some help understanding how to process it, what I did and what could have done differently. And these two steps are why we built academies around this. But we have leadership academies, 3 full days to some feedback. We have 3 full days in coaching. We have a 2-day academy in hiring and onboarding. There's one in mid-March coming up. And then we have a 2-day academy just on recognition and how you need the crowd to be a bigger part of it. So we'll build academies and other stuff, but this is what we have so far. And I was thinking, just waking up this morning, we have people from Air University for the Air Force. We have people from NLEC from the Navy. We should have our team work with you and just download everything we've done here so you can translate into, instead of a curriculum on steroids, right, what can occur over a course of a longer window. So we have all the material. You've taught it to countless organizations, individuals. We've seen how it goes wrong in all the aspects, but if you're interested, something we could do for the education side, that 5% intensity. I want to show you this picture because one of the academies he ran a while back, there was a Sergeant General Major, I get the titles all wrong, but he, yeah, Sergeant General Major, right? I believe you guys should all be one, not enlisted officers. That's a different story. He's a Ranger, so Rangers are real badass, right? Special ops. And at the end of the academy, and by the way, the only thing we ask of you, and I know some of you are wondering, okay, when's the Tupperware sale, or when are they going to ask us to hand over firstborn, must be named Charlie, the other one, Megan McMillan. None of that stuff. There's one toll we ask, right? Which is the end of the academy, we want to hear your reflection. And the reason is not for us, above all else, but there's an entire army of next jumpers doing double duty behind the scenes to allow us to do this. There's an entire team. When you came in, people are coming in early morning, staying late, moving, cleaning. They're doing all kinds of work, and they don't get to see the benefit, that feeling of helping other people, and if it made a difference. And so that's why we want to hear from you. So I'd like to hear, I think we have a 4 o'clock, London may have already done it, or maybe not, but we want to hear from everyone. So just think of that. So I'll give you some time so you have no excuse to say I went blank, because you know that's a lie, right? But good or bad, we just want to hear takeaways and whatnot. But this Ranger said this. This picture, this boy has a popsicle stick, should be totally happy on a hot summer day, but does not look happy. And the reason is he is watching this. when you see someone who has more, it makes you upset. And so this ranger said this, I came in, skeptical, right? And then at one point I saw stuff you had and I felt bad, right? And I felt inferior, I didn't feel good. But then you gave me your ice cream. And then you taught me how to make ice cream. And that's what we're trying to do. And so I hope you see that. This is a chart we had shared with the board. This is actually the stock price of Amazon. The first decade plus of Amazon, the company was just doing one business, e-commerce. The valuation of Amazon over 10 years never really moved beyond $18 billion. Then in 2009, they created a second business, a business that they'd always done themselves, which is to run e-commerce sites well. And they said, we do this well, other people might need it. And they started to make that into a business. And the valuation of Amazon went up almost $980 billion from AWS. Now, the two are tied together. You need the foundation of the first one. It's their laboratory, in fact, that makes AWS better. And I don't know what will happen with the government JEDI contract thing, but they're innovating in this far faster than anyone because they use it themselves. The entire profits of Amazon is actually almost all AWS still. This is what created the value creation. And so shareholders and stuff, right? You can imagine when you see this as a board member, investors, they stopped trying to fire me as CEO for the work we're doing in business too. And I'm being dead serious. I had 2 board members work very hard to fire me in the process. We had to get rid of them. It was a long, long thing, very painful. But the notion of the second business, Microsoft, Amazon and Microsoft are battling for #1 most valuable company, almost worth $1 trillion. Microsoft's most successful product is Microsoft Excel. Few people know it was a tool built internally to manage expenses. It's an expense report. And that's how it got built. The best products ever built always got dog-fooded internally first. The whole better me before better you. It was something that they built out of necessity, which is then eventually how it became a product. We never intended to build this business 2, HR technology, these new management tools as a business. We built it because we couldn't find what we needed. And in fact, I'd share the story in one of the dinners. We believed very early on that HR, taking care of this enterprise, building the community was not the job of the HR department. We believed it was everyone's job. Just like if you bring the bacon home, it is your job to take care of the house. You can't say, I bring in the income, I can leave a mess, my socks, my dishes. No, you need to take care of the house. And so we said, everyone here will take care of our community. And you will, in fact, over the decade, we built it where half your pay is tied to how well you take care of our community. Said another way, how well you do HR work. Now, if you know anything about engineers, especially when you hire them when they're perfect GPA from schools like MIT, you can imagine how that falls. When the other places have armies of people to make sure they take care of everything they need so they can code more. They hate it. So the criticism we took, I cannot even tell you, but as we went through it, engineers also hate repetitive tasks. So over the weekend, they started coding, building stuff because they literally hated this HR work, thought it was for dummies, using some of their language, and literally started to just build applications, and 50 HR applications showed up doing all kinds of things we never even thought could be done. Then, of course, over time, that leaves the power of data and analytics and all kinds of cool things happen that manual can't do. But there are many ways to do this manually, and we will share all of it because that is, hopefully you will see there's one thing about NextJump. If you have your guard up and wondering where's the pitch and where's this and whatnot, the one thing you will see, look back, it's 25 years for us this year in June, how consistent we are in who we are and what we do. Go look at every data point, you will see the consistency of what we do and what we care about. And it shows up everywhere. And for example, in feedback, if you want to know how to do it without technology, we learned an insight watching private equity firms, how they decide on what portfolio company to invest in. You just get the junior person to speak first and then escalate up to the senior person last. Otherwise, you won't get the voice of the junior person. And you can do that in any meeting and any time you do Q&A. And that's the best way without any technology to do that. Situational workshops, there's an entire suite being built how to administer and do all kinds of other things, but you can see you can do this without any technology. OMMs, we started doing it on email. Yes, you can go and look at the trail. We'll teach you how to do all of that with technology or not. Now, the part of why I showed this was this. going years back, one of the things we did was we polled our employees, crowdsourced. We're making more money, is what we said. So what do you want to fix in the world next? Overwhelmingly, two things came back to us: children's education and children's health. We're like, that's public school. So we started a program saying, okay, let's put a team on it. This is what our people care about. And let's go and figure out how to fix public schools. There's, I think, close to 100,000 public schools in the US, 22,000 in the UK. We said, let's start there and figure out how we go in first, better me, figure it out, and then share all the news to influence every other company. And we will start by adopting public schools, one per office. And then we will set it up so that there are not enough public schools to adopt because there's too many companies relative to the number of schools. So we went in and we picked PS 119, and then we actually ended up funding their after school program. We teach at it. A quarter of our office goes every week on Thursday. So you have this quarter of the office giving and teaching what we know. That's all kinds of other things. London started robotics competitions. We did cross things when they had challenges with unions where principals couldn't influence curriculum. We said, well, we're the third party. We'll run a competition for the most innovative curriculum, and the winner gets to go to visit the London school and teach it, and vice versa. We can help you circumvent whatever bureaucracy there is, because that's what we like to do as Next Jumpers. You tell me you have a challenge at no matter how big a level. I always say that our people start to drool, saying, I think there's something there we could do that's pretty awesome. So this is how we trained Next Jumpers. And the schoolwork was so important. As we started to build business too, you probably saw it on the culture tour, but probably forgot by now. We built a model that as we started to have large enterprises ask us for software contracts, they also wanted consulting contracts. And we said, we don't have the headcount to send everyone to go visit all the different companies all the time in handhold. So an army of consultants, around 36 consulting firms, some of the biggest names, partnered with us for the last 3 years, waiting for us to launch this business. And coming to academies and learning and training, saying, we will be the ground force. And we said, we will train you, we'll provide you the products and tools, but we want a 30% cut for everything you charge than consulting. And they're like, these consulting contracts will be larger than the software. But here's what we said. We're going to take our cut and donate 100% of it to public schools. So we're not even going to keep it, the cut we take. But that's what we'll charge. And we took 30% because Apple does that, right? So we said, why not? Precedent set. The Apple App Store takes 30%. And so literally, this is what we started doing. So we created a foundation. It's called edu.nextjump to help public charter schools, social services. And we started to actually make cash grants on what we call Better Me grants. Basically, everyone's so focused in the school and social service to help the better you, they forget or can't put oxygen into their own selves. So I think in TNNA, we're subsidizing every staff and faculty member's vacation by $1,000 a year because we think that's a cool way to get them more fired up. I think Daniela in Boston, they're creating some experiences thing that you can do or fund it for what people want to go and pursue for like extra learning in different ways. There's different things we're doing there, but we're going to use our foundation. So all the software you see, if you're in public or charter schools, you're going to get it all for free as far as I can think of. So as long as Megan and I are CEOs, you'll be good there. And as long as Next Jumpers are around to peer pressure the next CEOs, if ever happens. Sorry. She's just been CEO for 3 years. It's too early. And someone asked me a question, well, what do your board members think about that? Your investors? Oh, they would hate it once we get to this size and we try to do that. Something my mom taught me, she's a pastor of a church. This church tithes thing, give 10% of your paycheck. She always said you have to do it the day you get your paycheck. And the reason is this, she said it's not your money, it's God's. You got to give it right away. The longer it sits in your account, you will start to believe it's yours. We built this in the same manner. Right from the beginning, investors and board members are thrilled that this part of the business is mimicking Amazon. The New York Times reporter is like, oh my God, you're like following their story in e-commerce and business too. Right from the beginning, we baked it in. We don't even think of it as ours. So that's a huge part. Kind of wanted to, we're at the end here. This is something we had shared with hiring Super Saturday candidates, saying this is kind of very apropos of Next Jump. You want to do more good, learn to make a shitload of money. If you want to grow, get good at grit. You want to be badass, train to be badass. You want to get to your destination faster, figure out where you are faster. If you want joy, get good at processing sorrow. You want to learn how to get in the zone, as in the flow of growth, learn to get out of the swamp, the grit. If you want to succeed, learn to get the truth faster. this morning when I woke up, I was just talking to my wife before the kids started running in, and it was a cool little conversation. She's executive in fashion industry, pretty high-powered, very successful career, and has started her own startup in the last year. So we've been together 18, 19 years, and she's watched the journey of being an entrepreneur, of growing NextJump. And the philosophy we've taken from the beginning was taking care of our people is taking care of business. That is our mission. It is one and the same. And we took a lot of criticism for that. And this is what she said to me. And I'm sharing this because I emailed it to the Strat team, which is myself, Megan, Tom, and Greg this morning, where it's kind of a funny joke, maybe a little too much, but conference calling last night as we hung up, I swear Tom, he was just kind of happy and just said, I love you guys. Or I think he said, I love you. No, I swear it was, I love you, is what I heard as the thing hung up. And we told him he's denying it. I think he just thought we were probably his wife, and he just kind of said, I love you. And anyways, so the email chain started back and forth, just talking about that last night. And then I wrote them this morning saying, good morning, team, right? So this is what Ella, my wife, said to me. Being an entrepreneur is so hard. For 19 years, I've seen it firsthand watching you. The heartaches, how hard you work, the pain you've had to go through, the criticism in everything and every way you've done things. And also celebrating the exciting times. Such a journey. But in all the years, I've never seen you so in the flow. You have the audience, you have the stage, you're influencing the highest level of leaders in the world. They're listening and you guys are doing it. It's kind of a cool discussion this morning, and then I sent it to our team. And it was kind of cool. It was just very cool. So I want to leave you with one last video. I share this. You think of hyenas, the sound. One is alone, two is not. One is alone, two is not. It's amazing. Two is the real key to scaling. You need someone to experience something twice. You need two people to find each other. Two is what it takes to create the movement, just two. I know it feels like there's a lot of hyenas in your organizations. I want you to know the stats and the facts are there. There's 10 times more lions to every one hyena. But it takes someone to go first to find two. And if you put two together, it literally fixes faster than you think. So, sorry I went over.